Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Adam.
My name is Tom, and with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
I was going to say, with our powers combined, we are incredibly hungover, but that's just me,
No,
really.
just you.
But I'm enough for both of us, in fairness. Do you know
See,
what
the
I mean?
thing is, I still get drunk. I just take my whiskey like a fucking man.
There was no whiskey.
So,
There were just jugs of beer, so hence why we're here.
mate, you got drunk on beer.
I did. Today's episode is brought to you by Powerade.
No, no, don't.
No.
Cease and desist.
Cease and desist. Stop.
Please. Power, and I'm
Thank-
receiving a text message right here on my phone. Powerade has explicitly asked that you not mention their products
Damn it.
in association with, or for any reason really.
Yeah.
Just you specifically, Adam Doreen.
Yep. Yeah, so Tom's not here this week.
Tom has been caught, welfare cheat. Tom Heath has been caught
Yep.
in a drug testing blitz.
He has. It was, look, we did warn him. We said, look, Tom,
I said he knew the risks.
he knew the risks. He knew going in that, eventually you will get caught. It's like random breath testing, they'll get you.
They'll fuck you up.
Yep, drink drive, you'll get caught. That's not exactly what he was
That's
doing.
not what happened.
No, it's not at all.
But that's a similar example of the
It
type of
is.
thing that could happen where someone gets apprehended.
You can tell that, like, the government's advertising over the years has seeped into my head because
You drink and drive, you're a fucking idiot.
because I just recite things through word association now without actually making any sense.
I think that's probably about 80% of the content of the show is just freewheeling word association from Adam Doreen taking us in strange directions.
Exactly, but that's what it's all about. It's a strange direction.
That's the quality that people pay for with
Yeah.
Unnatural Selection. That's
Exactly.
what brings us. That's why we get paid the big bucks.
I know. It's incredible for a free podcast that
Mhm.
people are forking out everything that they are
It's everything that they are
have
and
in
have
fact.
and are not. Even
Give us your soul. Speaking of unusual directions,
Sure.
there's this concept called compassionate conservatism,
now,
and
yeah,
we're going to go down the rabbit hole because obviously Tom's been caught as a welfare cheat.
welfare cheat because so the reason the reason why we say that is because there's this whole thing that the Morrison government has been proposing where the Scott Morrison is the current Prime Minister of Australia. If you don't like it, don't worry, just wait 10 minutes, you'll have a new one. Where he's basically proposed this sort of pilot.
It's a pilot program. It's a
pilot
pilot. We're going to
program.
roll out a bit of a pilot program. We won't roll it out obviously in full.
If there's one
Straight
thing
out.
the Australian government loves,
It's a pilot
it's a
program.
pilot program.
Yeah. You got to go. You got to be careful. You can't just go all the way in. You've got to have a pilot program. Assess the merits of it.
Just
Get
the
the
tip.
report back. Just the tip.
Just the tip.
Get the report back. Make a thorough judgment on it, and ignore all advice from that report, and then just do it anyway.
And then obviously highlight the places where that independent report stacked by your mates disagrees with any of your previously held opinions.
Yep.
And then do the exact opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. That's part of the the modus operandi.
So essentially, there is a plan for welfare recipients to be drug tested. They're rolling it out in 3 different cities across Australia. They're doing these pilot programs, which they will completely ignore the results of. Am I cynical for thinking that it is entirely hypocritical of a government to drug test welfare recipients when politicians are not drug tested
Yep.
in any way? And this is something that Jackie Lambie was talking
Jackie
about
Lambie,
on, I think it was
Channel 7, Sunrise, yeah.
Sunrise.
With
David-
Darren Hinch.
With Koshi. Not Koki, as you might have
Koki.
thought in previous episode, David Koki. So I'm just, what do you think about the idea of drug testing welfare recipients? Because
Well, it goes back to this concept, right? That the compassionate conservatism thing, and basically that ends up being this sort of. And Tony Blair actually,
Yes, this is a good line.
has a great line about it. And I can't remember the exact wording, but basically it was something along the lines of it's basically the same thing as conservatism, but they say sorry for it or something.
yeah, we're not going to help you, but we are very sorry.
Sorry about that.
And I think that's largely accurate. Like it seems as though the focus is around, like, to be completely cynical about this, is about reducing welfare spend. But like even the context of the act of highlighting this conversation, lumping welfare recipients in with drug takers, like even if the pilot program doesn't get passed, the act of associating those two ideas it's already done the job.
Yeah, I mean, and it sort of confirms people's biases.
Right.
They may already have that opinion.
People on welfare are just cheats. They're
Yeah.
scamming the system.
Yeah.
A bunch of them are on drugs. Why would the government be proposing such a measure if there wasn't a rampant
overwhelming
of
evidence to show that
drug use?
Yeah.
So the idea being that they get these welfare cards, 80% of their welfare is paid onto a debit card, which can't be used for gambling and, obviously drugs, and you can't pull that out in cash. It needs to be used on, like, groceries.
Yeah. And that's actually a separate program to what they're... I mean, it'd be tied in, but that's actually something they're already doing.
It's all part of the same oeuvre of thing that they're trying to do, which is to sort of victimize and focus on welfare recipients as improperly spending government money. When you think about how much of a fraction that makes up of the overall government budget versus, like, the 30 billion, how much was it? The tax cuts, the big business tax cuts in the orders of tens of billions of dollars. That we don't want you to think about. That is necessary government expenditure. That is revenue that we have sacrificed for the good of the economy, because we are economic stewards. But Carol down the road smoked a joint on the weekend, so now she doesn't get her fucking welfare. That's the real fucking problem, is getting people in the middle class and the lower class to have a go at the people in the poverty class, so the upper class goes, no one's looking at us. This is fantastic.
It's fine. It's all good. I guess, I mean, the way Scott Morrison puts it is that, obviously you can't... The concept is, with this, compassionate conservatism is a concept that we want to help people help themselves to eventually get self-reliant, right?
And I'm not against that idea. That's a reasonable idea. But the fact is, there are people, like Jordan B. Peterson illuminates this idea really well. He goes, there are 15% of the population who have an 83 IQ, right? You are the bottom quartile of the IQ gap. These are people for whom very, very basic tasks are incredibly difficult. They are not going to be able to participate in the information economy as knowledge workers. These are people for whom, mopping floors are a difficult task. There's always going to be a permanent underclass of people. Doesn't matter how many jobs there are that cannot function.
They might have a disability. They might have
disabled. Maybe they're caring for people. You don't know what the situation is. If there are 100,000 jobs and there are 100,000 people, there are still going to be some people that are out of work because they are not qualified, because they cannot
they cannot do the job.
It's not an accident. There are people that just can't fulfill that.
I mean, I can't find, when I was looking for a job recently, I couldn't find a job. I found it really difficult. So, and I'm someone who's got, a university degree. So,
Granted.
Arts degree.
Not a real degree.
So not a real degree, obviously. I mean, complete waste of money. Paying that Hexted
Our parents would agree, I'm sure.
Yeah. But look, I mean, I think that's my main criticism is that, okay, I can see where you're coming from and I can see the ideology you're trying to push and you want to try and save things. Currently, the welfare system overall is worth something like $191 billion. It's the largest portion. When you get your tax receipt, it gives you a pie chart of where all the taxes go, and it is mostly towards welfare.
And I think the whole reason behind that pie chart, by the way, is so you as the taxpayer go, fuck, we're spending a lot on welfare. Like, that's literally the point of it. Meanwhile, these like cashless debit cards and things like that wouldn't be for aged pensioners or veterans. Why? Because they vote conservative.
Yeah.
Right?
Basically.
Like...
And I think, and this is the thing, is that the system, it's hard. You can never have a perfect system in this kind of thing. And that's one of the Americans, I think, many criticisms of, welfare, social welfare. And the thing is, this context that they're coming from, it ignores context. Everyone's different, and I agree with what you're saying. Is that, and I think that's why if you treat everyone the same way, it just hardens existing prejudices and doesn't actually. There's no real proof that it will actually help things. I mean, in some areas, the job rates the employment rate has gone up, but not by much, and it's. Employment rates are a funny thing to measure anyway. So I think it's so funny, Jackie Lambie coming out and saying, well, if you're going to start drug testing people, maybe politicians should be random drug tested. And this is the second time this year that I've gone, fuck me, I agree with Jackie Lambie.
Adam Doreen, 2019, out of context.
I think she's come back this smarter.
A few things with, or maybe more empathetic. The thing is, drug testing welfare recipients is extremely expensive. like as a thing that you could do. Like, and what is the purpose of this? Say you catch Susan out for having a joint on the weekend and relaxing. Like, it's sort of a more insidious thing. It's like, okay, then what? Are we going to kick her off of welfare? What happens? We manage her more closely. That takes more money, effort, resources. Why? So she can live a better life. Like restricting someone's access to welfare when they're already desperate.
What does that? Does that mean they just turn to crime?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like I guess you're fucking homeless now. Like that's going to make things better. Like how does it make anything better by? It's infuriating.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what that next step is, right? The next step of going, well, okay, cool, we're going to stop your welfare payments. And then, I mean, what does Susan then turn around and go,
great, guess I killed myself.
Well, I mean, she goes, well, I mean, the logical thing that the government wants her to then do is then go, oh, cool, I'll stop taking drugs. But, like, it's not as as just a...
It's putting this concept of, like,
you can't
fairness.
If you're addicted to something, you don't just stop.
Conservatives, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's like, oh, I got a gambling addiction. Oh, well, can't do that anymore. No, you'll find other ways to facilitate that. And just because you spend money on groceries and you can't spend it on gambling doesn't mean you won't gamble if you've got a gambling addiction. What you need is treatment for the gambling addiction, not to run out of money. So, but the whole, like, presupposition of the way the sort of conservative mindset works is the value of fairness and like fairness to society and proportionality is actually more important than compassion.
Yeah.
Even if the better outcomes, you know, it might be unfair. There might be some people out there that are gaming the system, not working, being lazy fucks,
and
collecting money.
There definitely are people like that.
There absolutely are. I think they're probably a pretty small proportion. I don't think anyone's getting rich off the fucking dole.
Well, this is the other thing.
Like,
is that
just to finish this thought,
you go.
Is that like they think that element of fairness and proportionality is more important than the outcomes, whereas I'm always about the outcomes. If we give money to this person in this situation, will it make life better for everyone? If the answer is no, then maybe we shouldn't give them the money. If it is yes, then we probably should give them the money, even if it doesn't come across as like morally justifiable to go, oh, this person's a layabout, we need to give them money. Sometimes giving them money and keeping a roof over their head means they don't divert to crime. And if they don't divert to crime and we live in a safer neighborhood as a result, and I don't get my house broken into as a result, that's still a net positive for society, even if it means we all need to work to support someone who's a bit of a lazy piece of shit.
Yeah.
We still, as a society,
it balances out, right?
End up better off because we live in a more harmonious, crime-free place.
Yeah. So
it's just more complicated than you don't deserve it.
Yeah. Tough. No, I interrupt like a...
No, that's all right.
Bit of a crazy person. No, but the funny thing is that they've taken this approach, but of course, for much of the year, many people have been calling for a raise to Newstar. There's been many news articles on how people can't get by on the dole, basically. And what they're saying is you really need to raise it by about $75 a week, and that would
in real dollars.
In real dollars, and Treasury estimates that would cost the budget about $12.5 billion over 4 years and $39 billion over the next decade. So there's that approach, which I think probably needs to happen. But of course, it seems to be that they're putting this sort of focus. They're just putting the misdirection somewhere else. So what they've said is everyone's calling for this, and now they've just sort of shifted the focus over to somewhere else. You know, using the concept of we need to sort of clamp down on welfare cheats to save money for the budget.
But it's classic sort of
misdirection. Right.
It's like, what is the real problem? Like getting people getting us as society to think that welfare cheats are the real problem or immigrants are the real problem. It's just another way of directing attention to this thing while, you know, jingle the keys over here, keep the populace nice and distracted while the real rorting is going on the other end. The business tax cuts, the $24 billion jet program, all of those things we can afford. Health, education, welfare, those are the things that we can't afford. Why? Because we don't want to. We don't actually give a fuck about the poor. Let's eat the poor, and then we don't need to worry about them. Let's just kill the poor, and then...
It's a utilitarian view, right?
It's this thing, like this whole... And as why I find the idea of, like, compassionate conservative, like, as a term, so galling. Because, like, you don't need to... If you need to say it...
It was termed by George W. Bush, so...
You don't need to say compassionate lefty. You don't. So if you need to say it, there's something indicative that you're probably leaning in the opposite direction. Yeah. It's just like saying like, "Oh, I'm a rational lefty." It's like you shouldn't have to say that. Like,
I think the thing is, like, this program, I mean, they're rolling out the pilot programs. Great. I think, in some areas it may work. Do you know what I mean? Like, in certain towns that may have, like, an overwhelming meth problem or something, sure. Maybe it might have some effects. But to then to roll it out to the whole of Australia, where there are different socioeconomic contexts, I find that to be...
Are we talking about the drug testing or the
drug
cards?
testing?
Yeah.
The cards...
Also, like...
I mean, the cards aren't as bad, I think, as the drug... I think the drug testing is really a problem.
Is, like, we've run studies on this.
Not to mention the cost of, like, rolling out the program. Yeah,
exactly right. There's not an appreciable difference in drug usage between socioeconomic classes, racial disparities. It's more or less even across all different groups and ages and variances of people. We all sort of seem to do drugs in various... similar proportionalities. Now, the kind of drugs that you might take might be different. Like if you're a really rich lawyer, you might be, snorting cocaine, or if you're in financial services, like cocaine might be a thing. If you're a middle-aged suburban mum, you might be taking fistfuls of Xanax or like OxyContin and painkillers and stuff like that. That might be your drug of choice. But like a lot of these drugs, they're like, say we did drug test welfare recipients, I don't think like Susan having a joint on a Saturday night to relax makes her incapable of like looking for a job or working a job or being a productive member of society. Like there's all these presuppositions in here that like you can't...
But
like
if you're taking drugs, you're obviously an addict.
Yeah. And it's like it said in the article, like it was something to the effect of like, if you're on drugs, you're not being a productive member of society. It's like, mate, look at Seattle. One of the most productive tech hubs in the world. There's legal weed, people smoking it everywhere. Very fucking productive members of society there. It's not an issue, which isn't to say that there isn't abuse and there isn't like things can get out of control. But I just don't... Why is this a thing that we keep circling back to every 5 or 10 years rather than having an actual conversation about addiction and an actual conversation about welfare and society? Like, why does it always revolve to the lowest common denominator, dumb bullshit? Like, should we drug test welfare recipients? Like... Why is that the binary? Yes or no? Should we drug test politicians? Yes or no? Like, if you make the argument that people should be drug tested if they're working for the government, then I guess that should apply to everyone that's taking money from the government or not. It doesn't matter. These are not the actual problems.
Yeah. Yes. Context is everything, isn't it? Really? I think that's what we can take out of that one.
I try so hard not to get upset. And then I read the article. I see the article. I see Peter Dutton's face, chin wagging, and just like hate words falling out of his shit mouth. And I'm just like, why is any of this still happening? How is this the discourse still? How have we not progressed past this point still?
Well,
and you know what?
The best part about it is that GDP is at the lowest point it has been. It
doesn't matter. Interest rates are going down. Economic growth is projected to be really stagnant over the next couple of years. But thank God we've got the shrewd economic managers of the Liberal Party in place to steer that ship towards the rocks.
Economic custodians, mate. That's what they're all about.
So I feel so safe, so custodian.
So safe. Jobs and growth.
Jobs and growth. That's
or
the
negative
important
growth, as it were. But
here's the thing, is I'm actually not philosophically opposed to spending less money. I sort of identify as a left-leaning libertarian. But
I think you have to spend money to make money.
Sometimes you need to spend money to make money. Yeah. NBN is a perfect example. Toll roads, perfect example, where we wanted to spend less up front, and what we've done is we've fucked ourselves in the long term and actually end up spending more. The taxpayer pays more for a toll road.
Don't get me started on toll roads.
The taxpayer pays more for a fibre.
Doesn't even go back to the government.
NBN.
Doesn't even go to the government.
What do you mean?
Toll roads.
Yeah,
like the money goes to a private corporation.
Yeah, the whole point is the government doesn't have to spends less money up front. They can say they've got a budget surplus because here's the thing: the costs are passed down to the taxpayer in other ways via tolls. So it's not being a shrewd economic manager. It's because you've just offloaded the cost elsewhere, so it's not visible on your balance sheet. That's not being a good economic manager.
Hide the numbers.
Yeah, it's hiding the numbers. It's not making the numbers better. In the case of an NBN, having a fibre to the home NBN, if it was rolled out properly, would be cheaper in the long term than this weird mongrel hybrid copper system that we've unrolled and then had to re-roll out, and then sort of the Optus's copper network was like thoroughly degraded, needs to be updated and replaced. There's a couple of $1 billion there. Like, it's this whole circuitous, like some, as you said, you spend money to make money.
Yep.
And that is the job of government, is to undertake those big projects to the benefit of our society, because it's the only organization that's A, big enough to do so, and B, motivated to do so, or should be.
I was a bit of a sidebar here. I was reading a bit about...
Whole show's a sidebar, mate. It's just you and me. We can do whatever the fuck we want.
So we can do
whatever we want.
We have freedom.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's 20 minutes in. We haven't even talked about the lead story, which is Boris Johnson.
No, fuck Boris Johnson.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. No, so apparently, economic growth at its lowest, and there was an interview with Philip Lowe, I believe, is the Reserve Bank governor.
Yep.
And they were talking about sort of where we're headed. So GDP's at the lowest. Philip Lowe's been talking about trying to give everyone a pay rise. Funnily enough, when members of the Reserve Bank wanted to get a pay rise from Philip Lowe at 3.5%, he knocked them back and then put them back down to 2.5%. But what the thing is, I guess, that's sort of happening at the moment is that, let's say interest rates go lower. Like they can go. What's happened in Europe is that interest rates go into minuses, right? So you get
you can actually have negative interest rates.
Negative interest rates. So Denmark currently has negative interest rates.
Say for example, if you like park your money in, like I know Japan had negative interest rates for a while. So if you've got a negative 1% interest rate, that means if you deposit your money, it will cost you $1 per year. You'll have $99 at the end of that year to have that money parked there, as opposed to a positive interest rate where you'd have, say, 1% interest, you'd have 101. So, like, it's actually costing you money to have it in the bank, because they so desperately want to propel growth in the economy that, like, you having your money in the bank is useless. They want you to put it out into the economy in shares or whatever, or investments to get some kind of return on it.
As Nonna would do, under the bed.
Under the bed. The banks, they are no good. Because the idea being, get the money out of the banks, get it out into the economy where it can stimulate growth. That's how badly they want you to do that, is it will cost you money.
And if you borrow money, you can make money somehow.
Well, yeah. Like, it really is the thing of, like Milo Minderbinder. Did you read Catch-22?
I didn't, no.
Yes.
I've seen the show, but not read the book.
The Syndicate with Milo Minderbinder, where it's like he buys dumplings from here at 7 cents, sells them over here for 5 cents, and then somehow makes a profit. And it's like nobody fucking understands how that works. That's the economy.
But the other thing that a lot of these European countries are doing
eggs. Why did I say dumplings?
I don't know.
It was obviously
you
eggs.
want dumplings. That's what it is.
I feel like dumplings.
Let's get some
That's
dumplings.
what it is. Subliminal.
This show is brought to you by dumplings.
This show brought to you by Big Dumpling. Dumplings. Fucking get them in ya. They're cheap.
Yes, the other thing that a lot of these European countries are doing, so you can have one arm of the government, which is basically the Reserve Bank. So the government basically can borrow money off itself through the Reserve Bank.
Yeah.
So
you see stuff like that, and then you listen to Robert Kiyosaki, and you're like, I think he actually makes some good points. They can just print more money. Money is bullshit.
Yeah. So this is my point: is that spending money to make money, you can do, even if like things are bad. There are ways you can just spend more money in some ways. Like there are economic theories to get around the concept of hyperinflation and other things that can happen when you're just sort of.
Yeah, they call it, in Obama's time when they were averting the global financial crisis, they called it quantitative easing. But really, at its essence, it's just printing more money to stimulate the economy. So, how do we get on to this? You were talking about what?
Just the concept that we're spending money to make money. They can do that. Like it's not like, the budget's going to blow out. I can't have the budget looking. The budget, it's going to balance.
The whole idea of a budget as a concept is it's a made up thing. Like it is dependent on a bunch of different factors and forecasts, and at the end of the day,
it's all guesswork.
It's a lot of guesswork, and.
The Treasury say one thing.
And it's dependent on a global economy, especially economies that are based on trade and consumer spending like ours. It is entirely based on a lot of factors that really are completely outside of our control. So, you can sort of go, the budget's in either surplus or in deficit. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Our interest rates are so low that what we really should be doing is borrowing heavily now when money is cheap to spend on things like the economy, on
infrastructure.
To spend on infrastructure. Sorry,
they are doing that a bit. There is actually a massive infrastructure spend going across Australia at the moment,
but like
it's
the
only
amount
one
of
piece of the puzzle.
schools and hospitals and all that sort of stuff that needs to be built is not getting built. Like
it's all just roads.
It's a lot of road,
which
a lot
we
of
need.
sky rail. We need that stuff, but all of which is to say, when you spend money on infrastructure, you get multiples back for every dollar that you spend. So we've got a labor there's a bunch of people that the government wants to put to work right there. There's a bunch of money that we could have for basically free that we could get now to build projects which would have long-term returns for society, like infrastructure projects. And there's the will and the impetus to do these things. Why is this not connecting? Why are we not borrowing big to spend on infrastructure to make all of our lives better?
Yeah, because jobs and growth, George.
But this would create jobs and growth.
No. You don't understand.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's reckless spending of the Labor Party. That's the problem, George.
Labor Party haven't been in power for several...
the economic mess that the Labor Party left Australia in.
It's been several years.
No. It's an economic mess.
Wayne Swan literally won an award for being a good treasurer.
No, but he got, he's not even in Parliament anymore. So
we averted the global financial crisis almost entirely unheard of in the OPEC nations.
No, the fact we've had 3 Liberal Prime Ministers over the last 9 years is it's nothing.
It's good stuff.
Oh yeah, this is the other thing with this. With this drug testing thing, this program, it's already been knocked back I think once or twice in Parliament because it was such a bad idea. So they're going for the trifecta. Now,
I don't like Polly's. I would have to assume there's some decent partying that goes on at the White House, given the Tony Abbott smashed granite table story that we remembered a few weeks ago.
Was pretty good.
Yeah, when Julia Gillard got turfed out, when K-Rod got turfed out, first time and the second time.
I reckon they just turf each other out so they can go to the parties.
That's what it is. They're just musical chairs for party reasons.
Maybe they should get drug tested.
I really don't like if this is something that you're wanting to apply to anyone taking federal money, then I guess you should apply it to politicians as well. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like people just say that as a cudgel with which to bludgeon politicians rather than an actual proposal. Also, why are we spending now all of this money on drug testing people for no reason? That's an even greater burden than the thing that we're trying to avoid.
To save the money.
It's we'd rather spend money on making sure no one gets away with having anything extra rather than, spend less money on just, and maybe someone ends up with a little bit extra. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Look, George, it could be worse, mate.
How?
It could be worse.
Could it be worse?
We could be in the UK.
That would be worse.
We could, be immediately worse. We could be going through what is arguably one of the stranger periods of UK politics in recent times.
It's an exciting time to be alive.
Oh, what a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
Now, obviously, we talked about it last week. Boris Johnson basically wants to suspend Parliament. It will be suspending Parliament as of, I think it's late September or something. And there was a few things we spoke about last week in terms of what will happen over the next week. Well, here's an update. Boris Johnson did try to call an election, I think twice as of yesterday, and failed miserably. And what instead happened was because he's essentially lost the majority, someone crossed the floor, and a lot of members of the Tories are voting against, essentially. They're calling them the Rebel Alliance or some stupid thing anyway.
The Rebel Alliance.
The Rebel Alliance. They essentially they passed another bit of legislation to reinvestigate, or basically what it did, it basically brought back a piece of the deal that Theresa May got from the EU but never took to Parliament.
Wait, we're going back to the old deal?
We're going, no, it's the new old deal. It's the old new deal.
The new adventures of old Christine's deal.
And somehow it sort of got thrown in at the last minute in terms of something they wanted to debate. Anyway, so he's basically lost control of the House.
How long has he been PM? Has it been 20 minutes?
Feels like 20 minutes. And the best part about it, this is the thing that I found hilarious. And I didn't know this, but Boris Johnson has a brother who is also an MP. He's not he wasn't just an MP. He was also Minister for Business. So he was part of the cabinet.
Under Boris Johnson's Prime Ministership. Which feels like direct nepotism.
Shh, don't worry about it. He's the right man for the job, George. He's the right man for the job.
It seems like there's a lot of men, mostly men, in your party by the looks of it. A lot of men for the job. It does seem weird that the best man for this job happens to be your brother. That does seem a little bit
He's just
weird.
really good at what he does.
It wasn't even mentioned in the article. They're just and his brother, who also happens to be in the front bencher now.
He has been, in Parliament for a long time. So he essentially was Minister for Business, and given the events of the last week, he's now resigned or announced he's quitting politics because he is torn between family loyalty and national interest, which is, probably fair enough, to be fair.
It's probably the nicest way of publicly telling your brother to go fuck himself that I've seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Words, we don't need... You define through your actions, aren't you, really?
Mm-hmm.
So, Christmas at the Johnson household this year, it's going to be a great one.
It's going to be real tense. Arguing over a turkey, which was, by the way, from the EU. Awkward. Very awkward.
Yeah, turkey market in the UK isn't prosperous at the moment.
Well, is this a French turkey? Are you fucking kidding me, Mum?
I
Keep
found that
Britain
hilarious.
British.
And he's basically, Boris has been copping it over the last week. There's been, he's
Hey
been
man,
out in the streets.
You wanted the
trying to
fucking job. You wanted the job, dude. This is why would anyone
want
to be prime minister?
I don't know if he
legitimately,
did.
I think it must be like a yes minister type thing where it's like a comedy of errors and he's accidentally ended up the
It's like
prime
Donald
minister.
Trump, just like trying to avoid being president, but ends up being president.
Accidentally ends up being president through his magnificent ineptitude. Now, speaking of Donald Trump, you might have noticed the inflatable sex doll version of Donald that we have.
You've actually blown that up.
I blew it up.
Do you want to bring him over?
I will. You vamp.
Vamping. Vamp. Yeah, so Mr. Trump, he's also back in the news this week. And this has been a gift that George was given by one of our friends a while ago, wasn't it? We showed the box, but I'm impressed you've actually... What made you want to bring it out today, George?
Basically, just wanted to get it out of the house, and I thought we got to blow it up, get some utilization out of this thing before we move it on. And
it's a sex doll, right?
Well, here's the thing. It's basically just a novelty doll because I've examined this thing without its...
What's the package in the middle there?
So you can't have sex with it.
Well, are there any holes?
There's sort of an inflatable penis-y thing sticking out of it, hence the shorts. I didn't want us to get taken off of YouTube.
Is the concept that you do it to Donald or he does it to you?
No holes. Yeah, you can't get him to... This little weak inflatable thing. There's no way you could get it to do anything to you.
Just like the real thing, really, isn't it?
I suppose. It's as true to life as is physically possible.
Are you willing to take... it'd be a bit obscene if we took that off.
Well, so you might notice I've attached a pair of my own underwear to Mr. Trump.
Nice undies, by the way.
Thank you very much. Uniqlo.
You've tied it up.
Tied it up at the back with a lacquer band because didn't exactly fit. A bit fatter than Donald Trump, which is
right.
It's not really a Donald Trump. Like, it doesn't represent Donald Trump in any sort of particular way. Other than
he's very fit. He looks very buff, doesn't he?
Yeah, it kind of just looks like a muscle man blow-up doll with sort of something that vaguely represents Donald Trump's face on the front of it.
Yeah. Does it speak or anything?
No, it's just it's literally just
how do you
big
inflate
balloon.
it?
You just blow it up with your mouth, and it took me about 30 minutes.
Maybe that's the joke, is that it's like Airplane, the movie.
Flying
high.
I'm just upset that there's no way that I could conceivably pleasure myself with this thing.
Can I touch it? Yeah, go ahead. Let's have a look. Let's get it over here in front of the camera for the viewers. Let's just.
It just, you know what it reminds me of? Like Slender Man.
That is odd.
Oh, you're touching the...
yeah, that is weird, man.
Touching the genitalia of
I don't
said.
understand. I mean...
It's
sure.
Literally just
do you reckon anyone bought it for like genuine use?
No, it's a gag gift. It's a thing that you give someone. It's like, haha, you hate Donald Trump. I hate Donald Trump as well. Let's fuck him like he fucked us.
The real question here, George, is what are you going to do with him now?
I legitimately don't know. I think I just need to, melt it.
Maybe you could become the mascot for our show.
No.
Unnaturally selected.
No, I don't think we will.
No. Melting it down and into the fire of Mount Doom is probably
from the fire from whence it came. It's the only way that it can be destroyed.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, Donald can sit here for the rest of the show. We'll get him. Just get him. Does he sit?
It's hard to make him sit.
Does he kneel?
He's not limber. Does he kneel?
Does he kneel?
Does he?
He does. Oh, there you go. You just sit there, Donald. Good lad. The real Donald Trump has also been in the news this week I guess it's hard to tell what exactly happened in terms of who did the thing, but essentially there's been a massive hurricane in sort of around Florida, and it's been through the Bahamas, and it's been just messing stuff up. I guess Donald Trump was sending out a flurry of tweets
As he is wont to do.
basically updating people. And one of them basically said, it could also hit Alabama. Or Alabama. I don't know. How do you pronounce it?
Alabama?
Alabama.
Yeah, almost certainly not that.
Yeah. So, which was essentially incorrect, right? It wasn't actually, according to the weather reports, it wasn't ever going to be hit Alabama. But everyone basically freaked out. It caused a bit of panic. And then Donald Trump, later in the day or week, I'm not sure actually how long after it was, held a press conference. And it was Hurricane Dorian, and he wanted to track basically the forecast of where the thing was going to go. Now, essentially, the final sort of place on this chart, marked in white, was over Florida. But there's this little bit, sort of, it looks a bit like a penis, but like there's this little bit at the end of the white...
Family show, Adam.
Family show. Sorry,
you're stepping on the Donald Trump
sex doll. Right, sorry, Donald.
Yeah, as I was saying, it's a family show.
Family show. At the end of the white phallic, progression path of the hurricane,
I'm curious. Before you... Yeah. Why do you feel as though that's phallic? Because if that's the case, I have some questions for you.
Well... Maybe it's an inverted. Yeah.
Maybe the first part of it, sort of, if going in that direction,
a bit of a knob at the
that
end.
could
sort of.
Yeah. So if yours looks like that, you absolutely need to see a doctor. So
cool. We'll talk about
just
that
to be clear.
Show if you want to.
I can provide. Little Donald here can provide you with an examination.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Maybe I'll compare mine with his. And we'll see how we go.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so at the end of this chart that he's live to the nation. This is like one of those sort of presidential addresses. Yeah. He pulls out this chart.
So to be clear, it's a map of the US which sort of delineates the expected path of the hurricane. Yeah. Sort of starts, in the Caribbean and sort of moves westward and sort of northwestward. It's going to, and
hit
obviously
Florida.
It gets wider and sort of hits Florida. Now what they've done is they've sort of someone, we don't know who, has added an addendum, like an additional loop. And so, but all the previous loops are like clearly, it's been printed out by a professional thing, and it's added to this map, and it's in white. And then someone's just like added a little dongle on the end of it in Sharpie,
little
extra circle, saying like suggesting that
it's also going to go sort of.
It could also sort of push even further northwest into Alabama, and everyone's like, the Alabama Weather Service is like, no, that's not happening. Please don't say that to people. That's everything in Alabama is safe. It's nowhere near going to come towards us.
Funnily enough, it is a crime to alter weather reports.
Yep.
So when asked, Donald said he doesn't know. Doesn't know who altered it. Don't know.
If it looks like someone added it in Sharpie, do you know who? And he goes, I don't know.
Do you reckon it was him? Or do you reckon it was one of his staffers trying to make up for the fact that he previously said in a tweet it could hit Alabama?
There's a great joke from there's the comedian. It was a black comedian in the 60s and 70s, and he died. What's his name? He made... why am I not remembering this comedian's name? He was in...
I don't know.
Anyway, the joke was, who are you going to believe, me or your lion eyes? And that is exactly most typifies the Trump presidency. Who are you going to believe? Me, this proper weather chart, or this thing that I just made up? And then, look, it's evidence because it's on a map.
And, of course, the whole issue now has been called Sharpie Gate because it's not a real issue unless you put a gate at the end of it. And the other thing, I guess the thing is that this is actually taken away from the real story, which is obviously is that the Hurricane Dorian has gone through this area and just devastated everything. Because climate change isn't real, guys. It's fine.
I love that we're just focused on the very dumbest aspect of this.
Well, that's what we do. I mean, we focus on the dumb shit.
Like the Sharpie around the thing, and we're like, haha, Donald's so silly, or someone in his staff is a silly Billy, rather than be like, the global effects of climate change are worsening all of these issues and will slowly start generating climate change refugees and make the world a much worse place. And the person who's the leader of the free world and who is most influential in potentially doing something about it is the exact guy who's mucking around with extra maps and things and not actually addressing the problem in any meaningful way. Is that a cause for concern? I don't know, it doesn't matter. Let's just jingle the keys. Welfare recipients, they're the ones. It's the Mexicans. Problem. They're the problem.
Yeah.
That's great. Everything's great.
It's good. It's good. It's going fine.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
The indefatigable march of time as it destroys us all with climate change.
Time marches on, waits for no one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But look, you can get more time in this world, on this earth. It's called cloning.
Yep.
You can clone yourself. Arnold Schwarzenegger did it. Sick day.
Well, yeah, I don't know if that was a documentary as much as was a fictional.
No. It was definitely, there's some
Pretty sure that was not a
science.
biopic.
There's some science in that science fiction film.
I don't think so.
Yeah, well, look, don't tell that to the Chinese because they're going right ahead with it.
Chinese are going ham on cloning.
Oh, they love a good clone. So, look, the question I have to ask you, George, is how much do you love cats?
Cats are fine. I had a cat in my youth. I'm allergic to cats now, so I can't get too close to them, even though sometimes I think they're cutie patooties.
But, like, if you had, hypothetically, something that you really loved, let's say it was a cat.
A copy of 2018's Marvel Spider-Man on PlayStation 4.
Okay, you had a copy of that. And, like, for some reason that copy died, ceased to
What?
exist. It's dead.
Oh, no.
No, the copy
of
Spider-Man 2018 on the PS4 is dead.
It's Marvel's Spider-Man.
Marvel's Spider-Man.
I would like to clarify, it's a good version.
Not the shit one.
Yeah.
It's dead. But rest assured, George, you can bring it back through cloning.
Yep.
And,
how much?
Well, how much do you have?
$40.
A bit more than that.
40,000.
No, it's in communist China, so it doesn't matter. We'll do it for you.
Okay. I don't think that's how it works.
No, it isn't. But anyway, I just wanted to make a communist joke. Basically, in China, there's a guy who loved his cat so much that he essentially it died, and he went to some Chinese scientists, and basically they've brought it back in its what they're calling the second incarnation. Is that the word? Incarnation. I was going to say incartation. That's something different. Incarnation. The cat called Garlic died suddenly 7 months ago, and
in a tragic garlic crushing incident. It's just a terrible misunderstanding.
And they've taken the DNA and they've reproduced Garlic, the second incarnation, for the joy of the owner. Now, apparently, it costs about 380,000 yuan, which is about $78,109.
A lot of money.
Yep. But look,
So
who can put a price on love, George?
Well, this company obviously can. It's about $78,000 American dollars.
I find this...
Okay, you have a cat, don't you, Adam?
Well, yes. Yeah, we have a cat.
So, if your cat died, and it kind of, the article makes it sound like it was almost sort of like suspicious circumstances as to how this cat died, by the way. When Garlic died, I was very sad, said Mr. Huang. I couldn't face the facts because it was a sudden death. I blame myself for not taking him to the hospital in time, which led to his death. I've just got more questions about how this first cat died. And secondly, should this guy be given a second cat, no matter how much money he's paid, to try and redeem himself for the sins of murdering the first... accidentally
Look,
having the cat
I honestly
murdered.
think my partner loves our cat so much.
How much would you pay to restore your... What's your cat's name?
I wouldn't pay. I'd be like, well, that's the natural part of life.
What's your cat's name?
I think Oates.
Oates. And how much do you love Oates?
I love Oates quite a bit. I mean, I've only been in her life for about 3 years, but, we've bonded. She comes and wakes me up with licking my head in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Fucking horrendous.
Yeah, it's love. It's love, George.
Is it love?
Yeah. Anyway, if she passed away,
Suddenly,
I think
who knows
my
how.
partner would want... I think she'd want to do this. I think this would be a thing.
See, like if my lovely future wife Gracie passed away, I think it would be very weird for me to clone her.
Not her, just the cat.
And get another one. Is it
like imagine you love a pet.
Just get a new fucking pet, dude. Like what was so good about this previous cat that it's $50,000? Huh?
Well, it's like another person.
No, it's not a person. It's an animal.
Well, I mean,
you get another.
What if? What's the little dog's name?
Romeo.
Romeo passed away. Do you think your mum would want to have Romeo
Mum will
back?
probably get another dog. That's what we did with the last one.
Well, it's a good question. How do we know it's actually the same cat?
This is what I'm saying.
They probably just got another cat from the cat shop.
It looks a lot like him. He goes, and the guy even says...
it's only about 90%.
Is a 90% similarity between the two cats is more than 90%.
Oh, you see, what they had to do is they had to get the frog DNA and splice that in. Because fill in the holes,
That it does explain the gills.
Yeah, exactly. They can breathe underwater now.
It's normal stuff that the Chinese government's doing.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
but they want to use it to save pandas. That's kind of like the end game.
That's kind of cool. Like, question, if we could bring back the woolly mammoth, should we?
Probably not the woolly mammoth. I think that.
Why not?
But I think we should bring back, say, like the Tasmanian thylacine.
What about
That was hunted to extinction.
What about T-Rex?
No. You just want to see a T-Rex.
You don't want to see a fucking T-Rex?
Look, I would not want to see a T-Rex.
We've spared no expense, Adam.
How close would you have to be to the T-Rex?
We've spared no expense. There's a 50-foot high electrical safety walls. There's no way that these things could possibly get out.
Oh, wait. It got out.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Someone should write a movie about
Someone
that.
should think about this in depth.
Yeah. Oh, great.
No, but in all seriousness, like, I get the panda thing. I do understand that you're rescuing a species which is sort of at the point of extinction.
Yeah.
You could bring it back, give them a bunch of breeding partners, maybe tweak something in there that makes them want to fuck a little bit more. That might be useful. And
because they're notoriously lazy.
they just really don't like to fuck at all, it seems. It's just like real like mid-40s couple that have got a couple of kids, and it's just everyone's working a lot.
They're just really...
That is the level of
peak,
sexual attraction that's happening with pandas at the moment.
Peak
it's
comfort
a real
level.
problem.
Peak comfort level.
So, sure, clone some pandas. Cats we got plenty of. Just get a new cat. You can love it just as much. It'll be different, but
because
okay.
I've always said, George, there's not enough cats in the world.
It's creepy. It's creepy to get a clone of your previous... Like, what was so fucking good about that previous cat?
You don't understand, George.
It's a different cat. It's not your cat, weirdo.
It's a second incarnate.
No,
I can't say the word
in Cat Nation.
In Cat Nation?
It's no.
Oh,
you don't get a do-over in life. It is unhealthy to maintain things beyond their natural life.
Yeah, but
it creates a certain like arrested development almost. The fact that this guy is grieving for a cat for 7 months, like you've got a mental illness. You need to go to a therapist and go through a proper grieving process. Getting a clone of a cat is not an effective way of dealing with that mental anguish that you're going through. You need to speak to a professional.
George, the new cat's pretty cute.
He's pretty cute. Look at him.
Look at your little face.
Look at his little face.
Oh, it's so fluffy.
Look at his little fluff. Oh. What do you call him? Garlic 2?
Garlic. I don't know. He's just garlic. The second incarnate.
Garlic 2, The Search for Curly's Gold.
Oh, what a hit. Someone should write that. So look, that's happening in China. Don't be afraid. It'll be fine.
It's fine.
Everything's fine.
AI enhanced CRISPR.
Yeah.
Fucking genetic editing. It's fucking
straight to your brain.
It's fine. It'll be fine. The future's not terrifying.
Yeah. But look, I mean, no matter what happens,
at least we'll have Donald here.
We'll have Donald.
You can't really. You can sort of. I guess you can hear him if you crinkle him a little bit. I spent like a lot of time blowing this guy up. I don't know if I really clarified.
You blew Donald. Is that what you
did.
say? You blew Donald.
I blew him pretty hard.
Yeah.
I was just walking around the house, and at one point I sort of felt a little bit lightheaded. I was like, if I pass out and bang my head off the ground, all to facilitate this fucking joke,
is it worth it?
It'll still be worth it.
Still worth it.
Still worth it.
Just like Unnatural Selection, still worth it after 10 years.
I mean, free all your money back. That doesn't make any. Thanks for listening, guys. We love your faces. Thanks for listening to the show. We love you. We'll see you next week. Make sure you follow us on all the social medias that have to or ever will exist at unnaturalshow.com. Unnatural Show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Unnatural Show. No, at George Tsipos. What am I talking about?
You can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen.
And you can follow this little guy here at POTUS. Or at the real Donald Trump. What is it? The real Donald Trump?
At the real Donald Trump.
At the real
fake Donald Trump. The other Donald Trump.
The other Donald Trump. All previous iterations.
Maybe we should. That's what we should do. Rather than throwing him into Mordor, the fires of Mount Doom, we should give him a Twitter account.
Thanks for listening, guys. We love you, and we will see you next week.
I know what you're thinking.
I bet you don't.